Superman, a controversial start to a new franchise. Guys, let me know in the comments if you think that this new Superman movie is a controversial start or if we just have some loud minorities or what's going on with it. Personally, I like the film. I'm excited to see where it goes, and that's kind of where I'm at. Let's check this out. What is it? Disclaimer, there was no use of AI in the creation of this video. You guys are pretty good at spotting AI. I think that you wouldn't call him AI unless he was.
Right away. This is not a James Gunn bad, Zack Snyder good kind of video. This is not
good to know.
Henry Cavill over David Cornswent video.
He's got disclaimers everywhere.
This is not a Marvel over DC kind of
All
video.
right, okay, we get it.
It's all about this movie, how I think it's pretty good, but not a good way to start a new DC universe.
Okay, so that is actually something that I feel like he confused people, and I thought this was the start of the new DC universe, but it's not. Like, I guess that was Creature Commandos, a cartoon that hardly anybody's even going to not just watch but hear of. I mean, it's weird to me that he didn't just reboot it with this movie. That's weird to me.
So, some backstory here, because I know I'm not one to typically make videos about superhero movies, but I've always been a bigger fan of DC than I was of Marvel, because growing up, I was obsessed with the Batman animated series.
Hey, we all had our BTAS obsession moment. When I was a kid, yeah, I love the Superman the Animated Series, but Batman, I was into that too. The Batman, like Forever came out as a kid, and Batman Returns came out when I was a kid. I mean, all those great movies, arguably. Something about Batman. We just all had that time. We were into Batman.
The Superman animated series, and of course, Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. So when 2012 rolled around and we got the Avengers, it was great. It was awesome. But a little part of me inside wished that this could have been the Justice League instead.
Dude, he says he doesn't make superhero videos, but he is speaking to my heart. When I saw that first Avengers movie in the theater, I thought, man, this is good. If only it was DC. That's what was going through my head the whole time. I was like, DC, you keep trying to compete with this instead of just embracing the great characters that you have. Just look at those characters and
Eventually, my wishes were sorta granted, and we got the DCEU, who, in a rush to try and play catch-up with Marvel, released Justice League in 2017.
See, a lot of you don't like it when I say they competed. Yeah, these movies were made to compete. They were not character first like the Marvel movies. These movies were not character first. They were competition first, success first. So, like Man of Steel, they were like, well, Batman did real good with this new darker thing. Let's do a Superman like that. It's like, well, you shouldn't compete your own character against your own character, or try to bring him up to his level. He's on a different ball game. They didn't make a Batman movie that was like the Christopher Reeve Superman movie. You know what I mean? That wouldn't have made sense, even though it had great success. So I could feel it the whole way. It's like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman were all together in one movie when only one of them had their own movie. Whereas the Avengers, when it came out, a lot of those characters had multiples of their own movie,
And then again in 2021, which was, sure, a better movie.
That was a good movie.
But that wasn't really saying much. I was never a huge fan of Zack Snyder's vision for this universe. I think he had a lot of really interesting ideas, and had he been able to see those ideas through to the end, maybe I would have understood the vision a bit more clearly, but he wasn't able to do that, mainly because his vision was not Marvel's vision. And that's what Warner Brothers wanted. They wanted a superhero saga to rival the MCU, so through a mix...
Now, he's right about that. That's exactly what WB wanted. They wanted to compete with Marvel. That's exactly right. What can we do to compete with Marvel? That's not how you should look at it. You should look at the characters, get people, directors, writers that love the characters and put them in those places. That's why you have Green Arrow and Hawkeye. That's why you have Superman and Thor and all these characters that have similar versions of themselves on the other side, because they're always trying to compete with each other.
Of different directors, creators, and voices trying to tell all kinds of different stories with no cohesion behind the scenes.
The hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
The DCEU was ultimately a failure. But luckily for DC, after around 20...
I wouldn't call the DCEU a failure. I'd call it struggling. It had movies that did great. It had movies that didn't do as good as people expected, and it had movies that just bombed. And I think that Marvel's going through a lot of that right now. They've got movies that just aren't doing very well. That they're used to doing so well. I don't know.
2019 with the release of Avengers Endgame.
Let me know if you think the DCEU was just a failure. Okay, I feel like it was struggling. I don't think it was a failure.
Marvel has tripped and fell over themselves time and time again, now looking more like the DCEU than phases 1 to 3 of the MCU. So
weird.
There was an opportunity to start fresh, to reignite some love for these DC characters, to take their time and plan out a universe. That way one day, both Marvel and DC could actually be on the same level.
It'd be cool if we had a crossover movie. James Gunn has mentioned that maybe within the next 10 years we could possibly have Spider-Man and Superman together, and they've got that new Spider-Man Superman comic coming. So
Warner Brothers brought in James Gunn and Peter Safran to spearhead a new DC universe, starting with its first live-action project, kinda, with Superman. Now, I watched this movie in theaters, thought there were some issues, but ultimately I had a good time with it, and thought
it's an enjoyable film. Yeah, I don't think it's a 9 or a 10, but it's an enjoyable film for sure.
That it was a bold first chapter in the new DCU. Recently, I had an itch to watch the movie again, so I watched it with my girlfriend, who is in no way a fan of DC or the character of
Is that your girlfriend? Adobe stock, no.
Superman. And after watching the movie with her, or really watching her watch the movie, the problems with this movie became abundantly clear to me. This is a good movie, but it is not a good first entry to a franchise. And in this video, I'm going to be explaining why.
It's not something I've thought about a ton, other than the fact that I feel like it feels like the DCU is rebooting, or the DC is rebooting, but we didn't really make that clear. And then it was not clear because a lot of people don't realize that, Creature Commandos, Peacemaker, there's all this other stuff that goes in with it. And I feel like he should have just wiped the slate clean, boom, started fresh here,
That is. So let's get repeatedly beat up, go shitpost with some monkeys on the internet, and sideline the main character as we talk about Superman 2025.
All right. That makes sense. I think that the movie, like you said, it's good. I don't know, though, that I feel. Let me know in the comments if you feel like it's a bad start. I'm not sure. Maybe by the end I'll agree with him. I don't know. I don't know if it's a bad start to a franchise or not. The Thrifty Typewriter. I like that. My wife would like that. Episode number 214. Wow.
Starting right off the bat, this movie doesn't really begin on a high note. We get a pretty standard opening crawl giving us the baseline about how superheroes already exist.
I kind of thought it was on a high note. He gets charged up. He goes out and battles. Like it's pretty. I feel like it does start off pretty strong.
In this world, and then a battered and injured Superman. And now, after seeing this movie twice, this scene really just acts as a baseline for how we're going to see Superman for about 60% of the movie. It almost feels like we're missing an entire opening sequence. Like the first 20 minutes of this movie is just...
I still don't feel that way. I hear people saying it a lot. I don't feel like I was missing anything. They told us what we needed to know in the Word, something a lot of movies do. Star Wars, for example, you read a big old book and then boom, action. It's not undone. It's not unheard of, and it wasn't done badly. I guess people just are used to superheroes having origins, and they were like, wait, there was a fight? We didn't see the fight? I don't know. I just hasn't affected me.
Cut out. This is something my girlfriend pointed out right away. She asked if this was a sequel, and if we could watch the first one instead.
That is a good point. I've seen so many reactors react to this film, and they keep saying, wait, so this is not Henry Cavill. So is this did you just recast him? It's like, no, he's not recasted. It's just rebooted. That's where I think he should have just made the slate clean and obvious and tell people this is a new Superman. And that might be why people had the origin issue, because they're like, if you do an origin, we all know, okay, rebooted. That's a fair point. I hadn't really considered too much.
And that was really the light bulb that went off in my head, and I realized Yeah, this isn't a very new audience-friendly type of movie. Wouldn't it have been cool to see Superman at the top of his game at the start of the movie, then he gets beaten and broken down and builds himself back up over the course of the movie? I think that was ultimately what James was trying to go for here. The first time we see Superman, he's at his lowest, and the last time we see him, he's at his highest. But we don't get a whole lot of Superman at his best in this movie. And
yeah, that does bother me to an extent. Not really badly. But for the new people not really realizing that this dude is powered down most of the movie. And even when we think he's 100%, like at the end, he's not really, because he didn't have the fortress to charge him. He had kryptonite poisoning, went to sleep in the dark, woke up, got out there. That can't be 100%. You know what I'm saying? Like, it can't be. So that's something that the audience isn't thinking about. People like me, yeah, I acknowledge that the whole time. The rest of them just didn't know where his limits were.
when watching a movie called Superman, I don't know, that's kind of what I expected to see. By the end of the prologue, Superman doesn't feel very much like Superman. This was an issue in the Justice League TV show, too. In order for everybody to be on an even playing field, they had to nerf Superman into oblivion. He's almost constantly hurt or taking the brunt end of hits just to try and slow him down and let the others shine. In order to show Superman not being invincible, they need to humanize him.
This is one reason I say Superman should have his solo movies. He should have movies with just him. Constantly making Superman need other people is difficult for writers to... I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying it's difficult for writers to do properly. Because what it should be is there should be a focus issue where he's... Not that he can't handle a situation, it's that he can't handle 4 of them going on at once. You know, and they kind of did that in this movie, but at the same time, they powered him down so that he could fight 2 people. And, you know, there's a lot of... It didn't bother me quite like it's bothered other people, but I can see why it's bothered them.
To give him the goals and motivations of a normal person. But the problem with Superman is that he is invincible. So every story containing him just feels like it's first and foremost about how they can break him down, which is one of the core issues with the character itself. Because of this prologue not giving a whole lot of backstory, it's filled to the brim with exposition.
I put your parents' message on to soothe you.
Thank you.
He finds it soothing.
It's like he knows Superman's every move before he makes it.
He does. He's been studying him for years. I come from a planet called Krypton.
Okay.
Which is gone now, by the way.
And more importantly, it's filled with a lot of questions. Now, I knew the answers to these questions. I didn't really think anything was too off, but my girlfriend asked me things like, why does Lex Luthor hate Superman so much? How is there a dog with superpowers? How does Lois know Clark's identity, and how did she react when she found that out? Do his parents know his real identity? Why does he work as a journalist, and who are all these people? And while some of these questions get answered along the way, some of them don't.
That is a great point. That's a really good point. That's one thing I've said is general audiences don't care like we do about these characters. So a lot of the stuff that we say is going to make the movie fail doesn't. But what he's pointing out is that the general audience doesn't know anything about these characters and needs to know a little bit more. Just assuming that, you don't need to do an origin because everybody knows the character, that's okay, but then we also do have a lot of assumptions that go in there as well. But regardless of those questions that she had, you didn't really need to know the answer. You didn't need to know the answer to understand where the film was going and what it was doing. You were dropped in there and you have enough information to be able to, follow along. And I think that's where, though her questions are valid, they're not movie ruining, which is why, as he said, it's a good movie. And I guess those things are what kept it from being great in his eyes.
So for people who don't know the story of Superman and went into this movie to learn, they probably weren't too satisfied. But even as a fan of the Superman world and lore, I would have liked to see more of how the Lois and Clark romance was built up. In their first scene together,
I didn't feel like I was missing anything on that. But that could just be because I'm so used to that happening. I don't know. It also could be because the last Superman and Lois didn't have great chemistry. Amy Adams and Henry Cavill's chemistry is almost non-existent. They had chemistry like crazy. I didn't care how they fell in love or knew each other. I was just like, wow, they're clearly a couple. Like, that's for real.
They fight for over 50% of it and end it on a note that seems like they're breaking up. This is the love story we're supposed to see grow and develop and root for. Now afterwards, we finally get a scene of Superman actually battling this giant monster in the most Superman way possible. He's distracting it away from other people, making sure everybody around is safe and sound, and trying to find some way to actually save this thing. And
it shows us how much he loves life. I loved that scene. It was very, very well done. I've heard a lot of complaints about that scene. As a Superman fan who knows the character of Superman and realizes a lot of people don't get it, this Superman showed it. And I say character, I should be saying heart. Because a lot of people, when I say character, like, it didn't get the character right. It got his heart right. Yes, David was a different Superman than we've seen, but the heart was right.
This whole sequence is great. James Gunn, like Zack Snyder before him, is very good at directing these action sequences. It gives a great scope and scale into Superman's powers and viewing them effectively. He's great at showing this throughout the entire movie. I think something like this scene would have been perfect to open up the movie with. Superman saves the day, and then the Hammer of Baravia comes along and he loses that fight, then takes us to where the beginning actually started. This scene also introduces us to the Justice Gang. Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, and Mr. Terrific. This is obviously the precursor to the Justice League. They're supposed to be a little all over the place and not that great of a team, and I think
none
this
of them are that
showcases
great,
that well, and will probably be a great scene to look back on whenever we do eventually get the actual Justice League.
Will we, though? We got Clayface, we got Supergirl, we got Man of Tomorrow. None of these movies seem to be building on the characters that were started. I thought that what was going to happen was we're going to have Superman, then we were going to have a Green Lantern movie and a Hot Girl movie and a Mr. Terrific movie. That's not happening. I'm so confused by that. I'm like, so we got the Justice League gang in there, but we didn't have them in there for the purpose of expanding on that. We had them in there for the purpose of them being in there,
working together, and then comparing the two scenes and the two teams with how well they work together. The first big twist in this movie comes from Lex Luthor translating the message from Superman's
Comment how you feel about that. I'm not super happy.
parents,
I think it was done well, but I'm not happy.
Bradley Cooper and Clementine, and telling the world that Superman was sent here by his parents to become their ruler. You know, an obvious bit of deception by Lex's part, but it did work, and the world turns against Superman until he finds out that, that his parents were actually telling the truth.
No way, Clark. I know this computer forensics guys. They're not gonna say it's legit unless they are sure.
Now, this twist of intentions isn't unheard of in Superman lore or comics, but it is a pretty controversial decision. And controversial decisions for this movie, again,
people hated it in Smallville.
Feels like a strange choice. Superman's entire character in this movie is all about empathy. Empathy for the life on planet Earth, no matter how big or small. For this twist to be real, essentially gives Clark/Superman the whole "I'm not who I thought I was, and I'm okay with that" type of character arc, which is really one of my least favorite types of character.
I don't think that's what he meant. He said, "I'm not who I thought I was." That was his line. But the point wasn't, and I'm okay with that. The point was, I'm not who I thought I was, and then him realizing I am who I thought I was, just not for the reasons why I thought. He thought that he was the way he was because his parents from Krypton sent him there to do these good things. Then he realized it wasn't them. It was my parents on Earth. That's why we see at the end he's now being soothed by his real parents. So I don't know if I agree with that.
Arcs. It actually reminds me quite a bit of the movie Captain Marvel. So do with that what you will. By the end of the movie, I think that the character arc is sold pretty well. His real parents are the Kents, and who they raised him to be is more important than what his birth parents say. It's a great message about found family and expectations set on you by your own family, and I think the core essence of Superman is done very well. Far better than what we've seen in the past decade on the big screen. But also, people wanted to see a movie about Superman in a movie called Superman, which is where I think James Gunn got a bit carried away. For about 60% of this movie, Superman is incapacitated in one way or another, which opens the door for other characters to have the spotlight. James Gunn was hired to make a universe, and whether he wanted to or not, this movie very much feels like setup for that universe, while also telling this side story about Superman and...
But again, none of the coming movies seem to be based on these characters, which is very strange.
his thoughts and feelings. There's the Justice Gang, everything with both sets of his parents, Jimmy Olsen, Lois Lane, and the Daily Planet crew, Lex Luthor, Metamorpho, and I think outside of his parents and Lois and Jimmy, a lot of these characters are just taking up screen time to further build up this universe. The entire Mr. Terrific sequence is cool. It's well shot and gives the spotlight to a lesser-known superhero, but again, why is this in the Superman movie? This is a cooler action sequence.
Because Lois can't do it herself. That's it. She can't do it herself. You could argue that that's a cooler action sequence as Superman. But I still, my favorite scene of the movie is the kaiju scene, you know?
Than anything Superman has in his own movie, and that just doesn't feel right to me. The third act is, strangely enough, the strongest part of the movie. The Daily Planet crew are on their own journalistic mission to bring down Lex Luthor.
The third act is when you go from thinking this movie's okay to, oh, this movie's pretty good. It really is. It builds up in so many ways that you kind of, in the beginning, you'd seen everything in the trailers. They had that long discussion in his apartment. You know, it's really like, ugh, you know? And then you start to really get involved, especially around, you know, the Terrific scene, and then they go into the Pocket Universe, and he's in there. It gets really well done at that point.
With their own research and motivations away from Clark and Superman has two conflicts that he has to try to solve at the same time. The stakes are high, a little too high for the first movie in a franchise, but you kind of need them to be in order for this to be a Superman level
I get what
threat.
he means there.
But oddly enough, this is also how I felt about the Snyder films. Seeing Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman working together to defeat an enemy warmed that little kid heart in me because it reminded me of the animated Justice League. The high action and tension moments are great, but getting here feels a bit all over the place. The final twist of the film comes from Ultraman.
Yeah, I feel like Ultraman could have been handled a little... I do like the way he did it, I do. But I feel like it could have been handled a little bit differently. Ultraman is... It could have been a much better... And it may be this way for future movies. Could have been a much better Bizarro storyline. I like the twist, but the twist, I was kind of disappointed. She either should have been somebody like Henry Cavill, or it should have been like a Bizarro, like outright. You know what I mean? That would have been cool.
Who turns out is actually a dumber clone of Superman. I remember a lot of people wanted this character to be played by Henry Cavill, and that would have been cool, a nice nod to the previous iteration, but I also think it would have been pretty confusing for general audiences. But who knows, with this dumb Superman disappearing into a black hole, maybe that opens the door for another dumb Superman to come back. Seeing Luthor get taken down is satisfying, him seeing the footage of his real parents is emotional, and the movie ends on a high note, with of course a nod to the next film, Supergirl. I think this movie gets a lot right, but I also can't help but feel a bit disappointed in it as well. For those who didn't know anything about Superman and his story, they probably entered the movie with some of these questions and left the theater with a lot of other questions. Here were just a few of the things that my girlfriend brought up during and after the movie. Number 1. How did Superman get a dog with powers? This is ultimately not answered.
What? He's about to say this, but it was answered. At the end, you realize it's Supergirl's dog. But I guess, yeah, for people outside the fandom, they don't realize that Supergirl comes from... Okay, yeah, I guess
sure, it's his cousin's dog, but that also raises some other questions about how he has a cousin, and of course, where this dog with powers actually came from. Number 2, do his parents know he's Superman? Yes, this is answered in the movie, but a lot of the Kent backstory also isn't told other than a line in the opening crawl. Number 3, why does Lex Luthor hate Superman so much? On the surface, it's because he presents a danger to humanity, but beneath the surface, it's jealousy, envy, hatred, and I think the final act shows us this pretty well. Number 4, how does Lois know he's Superman, and what led to her finding that out? Ultimately, this isn't answered. While I think the final act does their story some justice,
but it leaves room for that in future movies, which is okay. Just because there are questions in a movie doesn't mean that they have to be answered. It just, you need to make sure you close doors that, have to be closed. This one didn't really need that, but it might be something you could bring up later and show flashbacks or something else.
I think that not seeing their relationship grow more organically was a detriment to the story and this film. Number 5, if everybody knows about metahumans, why does Superman have to hide his identity? This is something I hadn't really thought about, but I told her it was probably...
Well, that's why, again, solo Superman movies make so much more sense, where he's the only character in the universe, because it's obvious why you would hide your identity in that case, because you're so powerful. You don't want anybody to know who your kids are and stuff. I mean, it's not that difficult. You know what I'm saying? Or who your family is and your parents and everything else. Because if you have no weakness, those are your weaknesses,
To protect his parents. Although them arriving there in a spacecraft and just chilling around didn't seem to raise any questions or concerns, I guess that goes to show more about Clark than anything, which kind of leads me to the next question. Why does he have this job, and why don't we learn anything about his other co-workers besides Jimmy and Lois? I think this movie did a pretty poor job in the Clark Kent department.
The trailer made it look like they were gonna nail it, and they didn't. His voice almost sounds deeper as Clark than it does as Superman. I mean, it's like when he's in that place and he's talking, his voice is deeper than Superman's voice. It was disappointing for me as a huge Clark. To me, Clark has to be there for Superman. Absolutely has to be. He is part of what makes the story so fun. And I really hated that he didn't even investigate anything. And him and Lois didn't investigate anything together. It was very, very disappointing.
Only in about 3 scenes in the entirety of the film, we don't get a good sense at what his relationship and dynamic is with his co-workers, and with the exceptions...
I would argue with that one. Him and Jimmy clearly have a good relationship. Perry apparently trusts him. Lombard obviously, picks on him. Like, it was all there. I don't know what his relationship with Troop, but we didn't see Ron very much in that anyways. Most people probably wouldn't even realize he was there.
Of Lois and Jimmy, we don't spend a whole lot of other time with the Daily Planet crew. This was something I noticed on my second watch. I know who all of these people are and their dynamic with Clark, but that doesn't come through in this story whatsoever. At least they explained what hypnoglasses were. Next one, how doesn't Lex know that...
Another reason why I think Superman should forever and always be a timeless golden age story in the early 40s. That, I think, works best for Superman. Unfortunately, we never do that.
Clark Kent is Superman. This feels like the big one in this movie that this movie sort of glosses over. Lex has been studying Superman for years, knows all about the people he spends time with, and even finds his fortress, but hasn't gone to look for this journalist, Clark Kent, or Lois Lane for that matter. It just feels like a bit...
Well, he said he was going to kill Clark Kent next. I mean, he did say that. He just got busy.
Big oversight in Lex's intelligence. I think the most damning thing she said about this movie when we were watching it was that it felt like a sequel or like the 7th episode in a season of television. And honestly, I don't really blame her. In an attempt to not be like the old DC or the old Marvel, avoid the whole origin story portion of it all, and not do just a typical hero's journey story, James Gunn got very creative and a little bit carried away. This movie doesn't play
that could be true.
Not in any way, but for the start of a franchise, that isn't exactly a compliment. It would have been cool to see an origin story of this version of Superman. We've moved away from that in recent years, but I don't know. I was always a fan of the origin story. Hot take here, but I think we should bring it back. The last Superman movie lacked a lot of the heart and emotion of Superman. This one got that right, but the story It was a little all over the place.
Okay.
I ultimately think this is a good movie, but a bad first movie in a potential new universe. I think Superman himself as a character is great.
I'm not necessarily saying I agree totally with his take, but I'm understanding his take. And I guys, so far, this is one of the most level-headed Superman takes I've heard. I might actually call that video something along those lines. I don't know. We'll see. Or I'll put it in the thumbnail.
Great. I think the casting for all the other characters is great, but I actually think Man of Steel is a better first movie in a franchise. And that's no, I think I agree. Franchise speaking, the Man of Steel one, it stuck to its story, and it gave you a lot of room for places it could go. And I mean, yeah, I do think that story was very good to start a franchise with. Coming from somebody who is not a fan of Zack Snyder whatsoever, that's coming from somebody who isn't even a fan of Man of Steel and still thinks that's not a great movie. Whenever I'm talking about a movie that has a lot of great ideas but executes them poorly, I usually say that the skeleton of the movie is intact, but it doesn't have anything else to it. With this movie, it's the opposite. I think that the heart and the organs of the movie are alive and well, but this movie doesn't have any bones to it structurally. With all that being said, I still think James Gunn is absolutely the right man.
I feel like that a little bit in the beginning, but I think the bones develop pretty well towards the end, I think.
And to build up a new DC universe. His knowledge about the characters and the comics is unparalleled. He seems to have a very clear vision for where things are going in this universe and where to build it.
Yeah, he does.
I think he got way too carried away with this movie. I think this is far and away his personal worst comic book movie, and it's still better than a lot of other comic book movies, but I definitely expected more. If you're a fan of Superman and
he thinks it's worse than Suicide. Interesting.
Know about the history, about the character, and of DC in general, then you're probably going to be pretty happy. But if you want to dive in head first and start learning about the DC universe, this isn't a very good place to start, which kind of sucks to say when this is the first movie in a franchise.
But I don't think it's a bad place for somebody that knows nothing to be. I think that somebody that knows nothing is going to watch this and still come away. They'll have a lot of questions, but it's an enjoyable film. Like you said, it's just an enjoyable film.
I'm going to give Superman 2025 a 7.2 out of 10. What are your thoughts on it?
It is 1 point lower than what I gave it, which is like 8.2 or 8.3. I can't remember. But yeah, that is fair. That is fair, guys. I want you to let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think that he's got a fair assessment here? Or do you think that he is being too nitpicky? I like that he went from the angle of his girlfriend, where he was like basically looking at somebody who knew nothing about the characters and seeing how she enjoyed it. That was really cool. I did the same thing with other people that I knew, but I mean, everybody in my life knows a little bit more about Superman than probably his girlfriend. But I like the take. I respect it. I respect that 7.2 big time, especially the way he went about it. That was a pretty cool video, guys. Don't forget to check out my Amazon store. I have all sorts of Superman stuff in one place. Don't forget to watch another video and subscribe to my brand new superhero reaction channel. And remember, guys, like Superman, live humbly, do good.